Something I do fairly often with the planer, if I'm taking a small sliver off into nothing, is I'll start by taking that little bit off, and then I'll use my knob to fade into nothing as I'm moving along. It works really well, especially if you have a little bow right here. Then you start at nothing, fade into the blade, and then fade back out. Homemade frame and layout stick, guys. I made it out of scrap PVC. Took about 15 minutes with a hand holder and some routing. It's got some holes in it so you can hang it on nails. Mark it 3/4 so you know where to start your first one. That way your plywood hits at the other end. It's as easy as bang, bang, bang. Slide it down. Hook it onto the next one. Go all the way end to end and you're good to go. A lot of guys probably already know this, but the easiest thing to do with these bags, just roll them down. That way it's a lot easier to load them up when you just have it there, but you can also throw it on your bench. Maybe you need to drill a bunch of crap. Catches your mess, no problem. Little insulation jig, guys. Old hinge, some scrap plywood. Takes about 5 minutes to make. This is an insulation knife. They suck. Don't use that. Get one of these. You can get the smaller one. Whatever. Just mark it, obviously. Done deal. It's got a wood on the right, so you're right-handed as well. You're good to go. If you got R49, I'm sorry, because you're in an attic, but you just add a spacer here, and you're same deal. This is a trick I use whenever I'm remodeling a house. I take this right out of my 11-in-1. I put it in the drill. You got your Phillips heads, your flat heads for everything, for your old hardware. You got your various hex for your pipe clamps when you run into those for bathroom vents and dry vents, things like that. You got some torque bits for newer remodels. You got square bits for the older remodels, cabinet screws, decking screws, etc. Works great, one-stop shop. You're not chasing your bits around the job site. Decks are notoriously slick, especially if it's the new composite stuff. Easiest thing to do, throw one of your flat bars in there. Obviously you have to be fortunate enough that your deck's running the right way, but I use this all the time. Flip your tape to get a much cleaner line. These are my top 3 favorite blades in 15 years of doing this. The scroll saw blade is great for curves and the teeth stick straight out, similar to the laminate. These actually come in a kit. The bi-directional is great for everything in between. I got a hanger gun, but if you don't, just take your racks, turn the nail. No more hitting your hand. Sometimes the thick blade with the full stroke sawzall doesn't work. So that's when you get out your 5/8 stroke with a thin flexible blade. And you're done. Chicago screws come in a lot of lengths and they're the best way to keep your bags from shifting while you're wearing your belt and when you take it on and off. Before I invested in laser and plate level, I was always clamping levels together to get the length that I needed. It worked great. When trenching for plumbers or electricians and you're trying to save the drywall, tuck these in because they sit above so that could break. Cut a triangle below your baseboard and cut a line straight across here and give it some wiggles. Our full piece is left intact and we salvaged the corner beads so the mud guy should be able to blend easier. Leave a little on the inside to save him some trouble with inside corner tape as well. Let's do a little upgrade on my rusted rack mounted ratchets. Buy some stainless steel, cut off the S-hook, enlarge the hole for your bolt, drill a hole through your racks. Technically stainless and aluminum will cause galvanic corrosion, but I've had no problems after 2 years, so I'm not too worried about it. Use an open-ended wrench on one side and a ratchet on the other. I like to loop my ratchets like this, so I don't need the extra upright, but for about 15 minutes total, you'll save yourself a few minutes every tie down and you don't need to carry all these around. I cut the flanges off of an extra roof boot so that the marks would be accurate. So we slide it up into a dry fit and make sure we like all our cuts and make sure it's right above where our vent will come out. I use my hammer and bar or bars to hold the shingles up while I add my flashing sealant. We nail it all off and then we add some spot caulking to the top of our nails and we add a little extra to help reseal the shingles. And there's the vent for our kitchen and first floor bathroom. A trick I used a lot for exterior trim alignment before I used mostly biscuits was just using the pluggable screws like that as essentially a dowel. They have a tapered head. You want to use a 1/4 inch brad point bit there They tuck in real nice. You can use them for basically a rake board like that, or butt end joints like this. They have a pretty good grab. If you find yourself ever needing to take out a plug, simply use a pluggable screw, screw it in, pull it out. You can also take the felt off of the tip there, and you can adjust your material in or out if you ever need to do that. And those should come in handy for decks or exterior trim if you ever find yourself doing it. If you ever run into a jiggly door like this, there's usually a little slot inside the strike plate. You stick a flat head in there, bend it out, good to go. If you do a lot of kitchens or baths, I highly recommend having a wash sink around, just so the customer never has to go any amount of days without a sink. They only cost around $100. They take about 5 minutes to put in and take out. I've actually screwed directly to the wall, you can see here, so you can still tile your bathroom floors. It's well worth the investment, and I've had many customers appreciate it. In this bathroom, this is the only place this toilet could go, because the waste needed to come up here and it's as tight as it can be. So I dry fit all those pieces to determine the toilet location before I even framed this closet or this closet, so that this door can swing open and not hit the toilet bowl, as well as maintaining the 15-inch minimum off the wall after drywall goes in, that's code, and 12-inch to center minimum after drywall. This is a great way to carry doors or windows, and you can still have your truck full of tools. This is why you use stainless steel when you're building anything on the ocean. These are completely disintegrated. Socks are a very economical way to keep your safety glasses safe. I've had these safeties for almost 10 years. They just go right back in here. This goes right in my belt if I need them. I also keep a block plane in here, and works great. Sharp as anything, kicks around. A good trick to prevent your sheathing from wicking water up in vulnerable areas like this below grade is to just wrap some flashing tape around the bottom, and you won't have to worry about it. Sometimes when you're trimming windows, you're gonna run into these little things. They don't let your trim sit tight. You're gonna hit that. So just take your multi-tool, and without hitting the flange, cut that away. Now your trim can sit flat. When you're shingling under a window, the sill usually has a gap like that. If a full shingle won't fit, you can actually cheat. Take a little bit off the bottom of your shingle. The thickness is negligible, but it'll slide right in. When I'm shingling under a window, I like to keep my nails uniform, so I use a little, then pre-drill a small hole, which is about all this impact is capable of. Stick a couple nails in. Start the nail with your hammer. Finish the nail with a nail set so you don't hit the very expensive sill. Now your nails are all nice and even, which is important because this is finished work. It will be seen for years to come. When you have a funky window header like this, you're going to be tempted to assemble the whole thing on the ground, but I recommend leaving your returns off. It's a lot easier to deal with a shingle that looks like this than it is to scribe around those profiles, as well as if you do scribe around, this piece is inevitably going to break off at some point. And with this one, once you put the returns on, it's all locked in, much more waterproof as well. A couple quick cedar shingle tips. You always want to have a spacer on your roof to make sure you have an ear and reveal. The easiest way to get a perfect cut is to find a shingle that's similar in distance, rest it there, mark it at the right angle, install it, find another shingle that's close, rest it on your straight edge, mark it, cut with whatever you choose. That will give you accurate cuts, as well as the spacer giving you a nice even reveal all the way up. Just a basic multi-tool tip. Obviously you can turn your blade, because if you're up like this, you're not going to be quite as accurate. Also, you want to leave your hand on something. Believe it or not, while I'm cutting this, I'm actually pushing away with my hand. And I'm not going to try to cut through this whole thing in one pass. I'm actually going to score it in a few passes. Otherwise, it's a lot more likely to want to walk. So... and that's it. This is why you don't want to just cut haphazardly with a Sawzall when you're remodeling. Obviously we got 2 copper pipes and a shitload of wires, so you want to get one of these half moons tilted a certain way, set it up, and you won't go too deep. Sometimes in remodeling, you got to trench the wall for pipes, HVAC, or wires, whatever, so you need to take off your baseboard. Instead of just wrecking it, I recommend Cutting a scarf joint with your multi-tool that's staggered from your other joints. That way the old piece can go right back in. Find some nail holes that represent a stud. Tack your scrap that has a 30-degree cut with a brad nailer. Now we're just gonna ride this 30-degree with the multi-tool. Now that side's cut. Let's do this side. Now the joint's pretty good, but unfortunately this cups out and this cups in. So I'm gonna sand that down with a little bit of glue to coagulate some of the dust. Perfectly smooth. Now this side's better, but I'm still gonna do the same thing. A little bit of glue. Rub it into the joint. The scarf's nice, but we still want to rub it in. Get the bulk with 100 grit and then move to 220. Reinstall our base cap. The painter will caulk everything and paint it, and you'll never even know I scoffed it. I installed this door and the customer chose a rug that was pretty thick, so doesn't fit anymore. I'm not even going to take this door off. I'm actually just going to use a scrap piece of 2x4 that's ripped, cut to length. If you try to cut through the whole door in one, there's a really good chance that you're going to flex the blade upwards or downwards and things just aren't going to work out. I'm going to start by cutting the door with a fine finish blade, at least scoring it. Then I'm going to do the bulk with a more rough blade. When you're done scoring the door on one side, go to the other. To finish your cut, make sure that you can see where you started on each side and then put your multi-tool in between those. I'm going to give the door a little buff and wax with some sandpaper. And the process is successful because now the door can operate freely. Now, if you're worried about having too big of a gap on the inner side of your door, that can actually be encouraged by your HVAC company, because if you have a return vent, then it allows a lot of airflow between your heat, AC, etc. Stop roasting all your blades on lath and plaster. Rather than cut it, you're really just trying to break the plaster itself. So as you can see, I got no teeth. I've done about 50 linear feet of this, and I'll show you how well it works. No problem. First, let's make a little jig. We're coming about a foot on each side. There you can see what the measurements I took. We'll just tack that up with some brads. I'll just ride that 30-degree cut with my multi-tool. Rinse and repeat on all 4 spots. And when the plaster is done, I'll be able to use some of the old stuff that came down to make it look like it never happened. Cutting in a hearthstone, and I need it to be perfect, so instead of just plunging this with a multi-tool, which is going to bounce around and create issues, I'm going to take the chisel, go across this line, and then chisel out enough so that the multi-tool blade can fit on this side of the line and it won't walk that way. That's what it looks like to start right there, and then that way. And as you can see, the multi-tool blade will fit right in there on the proper side of the line. When I do this straight spot, I use the full 3/4 of the chisel so that it doesn't want to dent that way. But then when I go like this, I'm only going to take maybe 3/16 to a 1/4 inch out at a time. Now we have it all chiseled out. I'm going to use my trusty DeWalt because of the soft start and the instant stop. Don't forget to use our fingers as a guide. And there we go, nice and perfect. If you're doing up trim work, you've either run into this or you're going to run into it where you have almost no space between 2 pieces of casing, which makes it impossible to paint this corner as well as install that base. So you want to work your way out of the corner. Usually painters are last, but I hit this with the wall color. This piece of casing goes in. This small piece of baseboard goes in. You take your coped piece. We have a mark here for the 3.5 casing. The cope piece tuck in tight. We're going to cut that, and then when our casing goes on, it'll have the proper reveal, and we'll have avoided a headache later. So back to the basics, work your way out of a corner, not into one. When you're doing baseboard, you're definitely going to run into casing like this. Sometimes it's tight to the wall, and you might be tempted to just slap that square cut in because, yeah, that is caulkable, but it's still about a 3/30 seconds gap right there. So take the second, cut a couple pieces. I started at 5 degrees, worked my way up. That's what 8 degrees looks like right there, nice and snug. So that's worth the 30 seconds it took me. Before we just start slamming baseboard in, we always need to find our most exaggerated scribe piece, because whatever we do to change the height of this piece is going to determine the rest of the room. So if I need to scribe this, I also need to rip every other piece in the room by that height. Otherwise, this piece is just going to end up sitting high. That doesn't work. So if you just haphazardly start, maybe if I started on that corner and worked my way around with full height pieces, by the time I get to here, I'm going to have no room to scribe this piece. So always start with your most scribed piece, because that's going to determine the height of your baseboard for the rest of the room. Now this house goes back to when they had like aluminum foil as their insulation paper, so that's making my stud finder just kind of spaz out. So the easiest way to find my studs is the knock test here. Solid, hollow. So we know that there's a stud right here. So it's as easy as taking your tape and going end to end. And it's easier if you actually have two outlets, because you can just reference the other outlet. But let's miss a stud and see what happens. See that? That just bounces right out, pulls off the wall. So you definitely want to hit studs. The only time this might not work, which I almost never run into, is if you have mud plates like this, which just offset it a little bit more. But you still get the idea. They should be 16 on center. You always want to hit your studs. Whenever you have 3.5 casing or bigger, like 4 1/4 belly casing, or maybe a plinth block, you're gonna miss this stud. Just a little bit of math. We got a 3/4 jam, 1.5 jack gets us to 2 1/4, and then an 1.5 king gets us 3 3/4, which obviously misses. Even if there was a 1/4 inch between the jam and the jack stud, you're still only gonna have a 1/4 inch to nail to. So the best solution to that is just some easy gloop. We're just gonna hit that with a little bit of PL. And then the second thing we're gonna do to help ourselves is we're gonna hit it with brads going in 2 different directions here. So I call it the spider claw. I don't know why, but I always have. That's about the same hole, and I can guarantee when that sets up, you are not gonna get that off there. This is an example without any shoe mold. Here it is with regular 1/4 round. You lose 1.5 inches of the width of your hallway or wherever you're doing it. In a full room, you're actually losing 3 inches of floor space. And here's some 3.5 baseboard with some sash stop that is actually the same exact profile. Here's the difference of if you came around the corner tight and you almost caught your piggy toe, you wouldn't catch it over here. A couple more factors to consider is your nailing, where you're going to need to nail down at an angle. You can try to nail them straight, but the thickness of your gun and stuff, they could deflect, or just you could hit your floor anyway and defeat the purpose of the floating floor. Whereas with the sash stop, you're going to be able to go straight in every time, and you have 1 inch here if you needed to do a tiny little scribe or something to take the curse off a floor or whatever. So give the sash stop a try. It is the same profile as a baseboard, and it's the only stuff I'll ever use if you absolutely need shoe molding. Fold your sanding discs into thirds. That's going to give you some sharp profiles to get into your fine tuners. A more rounded profile for other applications. You can use it flat, and it's going to last a long time because it's made for a machine. I need to scribe a 72-inch piece from 1/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch, but I only have my 4-foot level. So the way that we do that is we come over exactly 36. We know that 1/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch is a 3/8 difference, so we cut that in half by 3/16. So we'll be going 3/16 bigger than 1/8 and 3/16 smaller than 1/2. That brings us to 5/16. I know some people are going to say to use a chalk, but I just prefer a pencil line, and this is a dead accurate method. I use it all the time. When you're laying out your deck, you want to step your ledger board far enough back so that you end up putting your skirt, shadow, and overhang flush with your corner board. On the inside for the cedar, I chose to buy some Alaskan white cedar decking and rip it 1 by 1 square so that it should discolor similarly. I used 1-piece pre-assembled corner boards so you can't see any joints here. There's a lock miter in there, so it's more stable than anything I would do. It is $12.50 a foot though, so it's $250 for 20 footers. Just keep it in mind. I used PVC inside corner up against the chimney so that there was no moisture transfer between wood and the concrete. This is going to get a veneer, so it should flush up with that nicely. If you have a corner board like this, you want to make sure that even though your last rafter ends here on the house, you put in a fake rafter tail. Give that somewhere to terminate so it's not a crappy looking butt end here. If you have dead space like this, which happens a lot around garage doors, you can just add a simple return to fill the void. Whenever you're working with vinyl, I recommend a flange trim like this. And also you can overhang your headers and run your pediments short and things like that, but it just looks like a more traditional clap than if you use this crap J-channel up against your trim. These handles always say 3 3/4, but every single one that I've done has always come out to 3 25/32, so keep an eye on that. I recommend taping the inside of your doors to avoid tear out. And I always use these DeWalt brad point tips. They're very sharp, so I can go right in my spot. Press firmly, and I know it's not going to walk. Some doors have nothing behind them, so you can just drill right through them. Other doors, you would drill into the stiles, so you need to hold the door off while you drill your holes. Sometimes your handles or knobs will come with 2 different size bolts, one's for doors, one's for drawers. In my case, only one of my handles came with the long enough one for drawers. As you can see, that's long enough. But when you don't have that option, you take your short one, you use a countersink, and you put it through. And on the off chance that you ever run into a bolt that's too long, you need a pair of pliers like this, thread it in, cut it, thread it out, that'll clean up your threads and you're good. When you suspect one of your levels is going out of whack, set it down on a surface, do an end for end flip, and we can see that it's now touching the other side, so this level is no longer true. But 8 years was a good run. I don't feel bad about tossing it. Quick door tip, guys. This floor was over 3/4 of an inch out, and then it was 1/8 of an inch out that way. So a couple of full-length tapered strips to get us a nice base. Another good one was to put the kick on first. Obviously it's a big taper cut, but there's no way to slide it in from this side, and to get it in from the front, you'd have to go with 3/8 shy and then slide it up. You need to have that kick in there so that this piece of aluminum isn't just relying on that 1/16, because someone's going to step on that, it's just going to bend over time. So sometimes you got to slide the kick in first. It is what it is. If you own or plan on owning a construction company, I would say that a dump trailer is one of the most important tools you can have. I bought this secondhand, and the guy before me was nice enough to have these aluminum uprights made as well as these custom racks. I was going to do something more formal than the decking across the sides, like diamond plate steel or something, but as time went on, I realized that these gaps were crucial to properly tie things down. As you can see, none of my straps go all the way up and over because they wouldn't catch any of the debris on the sides. So if I were to ever redo these sides, I would do the gaps intentionally, just because almost never am I going all the way up and over. And that's a little tip. I guess this little trick actually does work. Pretty cool feature on the Werner ladders. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. I'm not sure about other brands, but I curled my feet up a little bit. It works awesome. Just make sure you don't drop it. If you're like me, you've probably taken the side of your table saw guard off just because PVC and composite decking like to gum up and shoot back in your face. But look at the little trash bag. I put a small piece of 2x10 at the bottom so it'd stay open, but look at all that. It's catching, I would say, 70% of it, which is a lot better than 0%. So give that a shot sometime. I know I just posted this thing a couple days ago, but after quite a few rips, I can say it is easily the biggest quality of life improvement I've had as a carpenter in years. I rounded these over so I could still hook my pinky on while I'm doing rips. Everything still glides nicely. It doesn't hinder anything. Took about 15 minutes to build. Absolutely love it. If you got any scrap lying around, I do recommend PVC, but if you don't have scrap PVC, then obviously the materials are actually going to come out to like $30 or something like that. So it is awesome. I highly recommend it.